Thanks. Okay, first order of business, we need to okay the minutes from the April meeting. I need a motion. Got a motion? Second? All in favor say aye. Okay, minutes are filed. Thank you. Is there any public comments that need to come before the board at this time? Anyone? All right, good. Seeing none, I'll close that part down. And we'll move. We don't have any action items. I think that's unusual, isn't it, Michael? So we'll go to information items. Mayor Cooper here? Okay. He on route? Do you want to go second thing and wait for Mayor Cooper to get here, or would you like to go ahead? Okay, that's fine. Introduce yourself, please, to the board, and thank you for being here. I think what you're going to give us is I'm very curious about what you got plans on these things. Yeah. You need a mic? Yes. Hey, that lady there's going to keep us straight.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I have had the pleasure of meeting with many of you. My name is Diana Alarcon. I am the director over the Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure, and we're super excited to be here to share with y'all Imagine East Bank. To my right is Lucy Kemp. She is actually our director over planning, so I'm going to turn it over to her, and she is going to start walking us through this. And again, thank you for the opportunity. And Mayor Cooper is on his way. He has gotten a little bit delayed, but he should be joining us here very soon. So, Lucy, you're up.
Well, thank you, Diana, and thank you, Chair, for having me here today. We're looking forward to talking about Imagine East Bank. I did want to acknowledge Ben York, who's here with NDOT and the program management team. He's working with us on this planning effort. I'll get to that later. Listen, this lady's over here like, don't forget this. Anyway, I do have a short presentation to show you today. I understand we've got about 10 minutes. But before launching into it, I thought it'd be helpful to talk about what a vision is. And very simply, a vision in our minds is an aspiration for the future of this part of our community and this important part of Middle Tennessee. It should embody our community priorities. It should define the scope of the opportunity here, and it should give us some visibility in how to solve some of the core problems in this area. And there are some issues to address. What it is not is detailed engineering or detailed building designs. Like all humans, we want to say, why did you use the orange brick and not the red brick? I totally understand that instinct, but I would ask you to please look at the images in the presentation from a perspective of intent as opposed to very detailed designs, because those are coming, and we haven't done detailed design yet here. So we really are at a high level of planning. So while we do have a broad vision to show you today, we do have some very specific ideas about how to better connect this part of our city to its surroundings. We do have some specific recommendations to offer around accomplishing goals for mobility, essential building blocks that all neighborhoods need to succeed, and the like. And we are focusing on how to bring a major piece of our city's core to life, starting with its public spaces. To put this in human terms, this patient has been in the hospital for a long time, and it has not been connected to anyone for decades. And understanding how the East Bank can emerge as a better place has been something that's been of interest to Nashvillians for decades, and we haven't quite been able to figure out how to do it before now. And so we're looking forward to having this conversation today. So the East Bank is situated on the east side of the Cumberland River. You see it there in and around. I don't know if I can point, but the dotted circle there shows the center of the East Bank in and around the Titan Stadium. And then to the north or south, you have industrial areas that have been a part of this city for a long time. Beyond that, we have great neighborhoods of East Nashville and then downtown across the river. The fact that this area is characterized by about 120 acres of surface parking lot and isn't connected in any meaningful way to any of the neighborhoods around it, isn't participating in the transit system, isn't participating in any meaningful way in how people can move in and around the city, is hurting not only the East Bank, but the broader area around it. So while, yes, we have focused on the core of the city in the East Bank, we think it has much broader implications, certainly for our regional mobility network. And so we are right now in a public comment period. So me being here talking to you today is part of that. And I look forward to getting your feedback either today, or if you want to set up a meeting or send us comments in writing, we look forward to hearing from you. That public comment period closes at the end of this month. Last but not least, our approach to the vision. One thing I wanted to say is that, and I know many of you have experienced this in your communities, that managing growth often can feel like a piecemeal proposition, and you're just trying to claw back a sidewalk or trying to claw back a shelter for a bus station after the development's already happened. So that is not our approach here today. You may agree or disagree or not like some of our recommendations, but please know our goal is to ensure that we're building infrastructure with development, not trying to claw it back later. And the other thing I would say is, like many of your fast-growing communities, this area is already fairly intensely entitled, meaning that today any number of developers could come forward with plans to implement. So it's not whether the East Bank develops, it's ensuring that we develop it in a manner that is consistent with our community and city goals. So we've been at this for about a year and a half, taken lots of public comment. We've heard 4 common themes from participants in our public process. 1, we're looking for safe and simple multimodal connections. If you are standing in the area where the future Oracle campus is going to be sited and you want to get down to see a Titans game, good luck if you're not in a car. This is a very car-oriented area, and it doesn't feel very good to travel in and around this space today. An equitable and affordable East Bank, a desire for housing, for other uses that can support local jobs and the like, respect for the river. That includes our resiliency planning. This is a flood-prone area, as well as access to and from the river. And then third, neighborhoods for Nashvillians. And a lot of the comments here have been, we want to create a space that's distinctive from the tourism platform that characterizes other parts of downtown Nashville. So one thing I would say is the East Bank vision encompasses all of these areas. We're going to focus today on that second point, the first one, the safe and simple multimodal connections. But if you are interested in the fuller briefing, we're happy to come and do that at another time that we're invited. So we'll be focusing on that area today. So we evaluated our planning work at 3 different scales. The first is systems and network, ensuring that we're working with WeGo and Steve Bland's team to better serve bus riders, transit riders locally and regionally through our work. We honed in a bit more at the neighborhood scale. You see the East Bank there, 330 some odd acres in yellow. River North to the north is where Oracle's located. The purple area is Casey Place, which is a mixed income housing development in our city. It's one of the largest. And then obviously, a lot of residential areas to the east and downtown across the way. And then we honed in a little more under site. We do have about 113 acres of publicly owned land. And so we wanted to make sure that we honed our microscope in here and really considered what it is we wanted. Public land is a public trust. And so we want to make sure that we're developing it in an appropriate way. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Ben York to talk a little more about that mobility piece.
That's okay. Good morning. Thank you guys for allowing me and Lucy to come in and speak with you this morning. Forgive us if we sound robotic because we've done this many, many times, and we're looking to get positive and negative feedback and really just understand what you guys' thoughts and concerns are just in a brief snippet. So. Like Lucy mentioned, we looked at this in both a local and a regional scale, starting at the jumping out of the airplane and landing as well. So, am I going backwards? Yeah, I'm going backwards. So this is what we're currently looking at today on the left. This is if you did a flyover of downtown Nashville, this is what the East Bank looks like today, and what the opportunities for redevelopment in this area are, in what could be is an early rendering that one of our local architects had done on the right. So like Lucy said, the East Bank is currently envisioned around the Jefferson Street to the north, the river on the east or the west and the south, and then the interstate, which divides this area from East Bank or East Nashville proper to the east. And this is starting to show some of the connectivity that Lucy mentioned earlier about being very auto-oriented and not at the pedestrian scale. You can see that there is a significant amount of waterfront that we look to engage more properly in the future, but we currently only have about 1/4 of an acre that we engage today, or 1/4 of a mile, sorry. From this slide, you can see that the existing infrastructure grid and how lacking it is. We're going to show you on the next slide how this overlay and this the vision plan really starts to lay out a dense grid that allows for a neighborhood to be constructed. Important to this body is how the regional connectivity for this is. We started looking at this as an opportunity for not only connecting to the East Bank, but connecting through the East Bank. And so allowing for opportunities to connect from the interstate, say points south, points west, points north, and how you could access this from a transit perspective, as well as a cycle perspective and on foot. The Oracle campus is located to the north, and there's a good partnership agreement working through with the state, TDOT, on some construction there and some modifications to some of the interstate to allow for better access to that campus and to that area, and be the real catalyst and the driver for how we get this East Bank plan started and rolling. This is an idea and a concept. Like Lucy said, don't focus so much on the glass and the bricks and what the buildings look like, but more the scale and the proportions of how the East Bank Boulevard that we've discussed multiple times, how that could be envisioned and could function. It is currently designed or currently being envisioned as a dedicated fixed guideway BRT center running with median stops located within that GNRC median. It does currently have 2 travel lanes in each direction, as well as the opportunity for street cafes or on-street parking or loading zones and things of that nature that could facilitate that dense growth and activation at the street side. This is a vision of what it could look like from the pedestrian scale of how you could see it as a person walking it or biking it. So the next several slides are a discussion on mobility and really focus centrally on downtown and how you interact within our local grid. I can kind of slide through these pretty quickly, and we can look at the larger mobility piece that is for the more regional discussion as well, but we can come back to any of these if anyone has a question. This is the existing network. The darker lines are the existing transit ridership lines. This is starting to look at some of how the East Bank Boulevard, multimodal boulevard, could it be impacting the existing infrastructure, as well as some northern and southern termini of how we connect to the greater WeGo system. And then these are all slides that show the ridership and demand that currently exist out there today, as well as some of the operating problems and issues and opportunities, I think we should say, opportunities that WeGo faces today. And so this is the slide that kind of starts to speak to the regional mobility of how we can create a better transit network and how we can start to create places or connect places via this area that has kind of fallen as a barrier between connectivity. And so really starting to create some of that north-south and east-west connectivity that would make the plan and the city and the local area really start to function more holistically in a better manner. You can see here where you could connect from the north and from the south, as well as from the east and the west. I will speak briefly on bikeways and bike facilities. This is our current bike facilities located within the East Bank. They are what has been described as anemic or lacking, for lack of a better term. And so we're really starting to try to think about how we can lead out as a city on providing alternative means for transportation in the area, and this is what we have envisioned. We're putting out a plan that envisions 16 plus miles of bike facilities, dedicated bike facilities that are protected, and low stress bike facilities within the East Bank that would allow for a mix of users, various skill types and levels that would allow for a local connection rather than having to jump in a car to complete a half a mile drive. You could reasonably connect it with a bike facility that is low stress and a very safe and economical means. So this is a vision of what South 2nd could be. So one of the parallel streets through the East Bank, this is what a local street could be. Very generous sidewalks and bike facilities that are buffered and protected so that each user has a safe local connection for their means. This is what a residential public street could be, and what we're looking at here is having a real complete street here and allow the landscaping to be performative and treat stormwater in that space, as well as buffer the pedestrian and the cyclist from the road network. And so we've really tried to look at this from a larger perspective of transit and bikes and peds are our first priority, and really try to lead out in the local area as that is our priority, as well as on a global scale trying to make sure that all of those connections are done appropriately so that we can have a regional connection as well. This is the Waterside Drive. This is the road that parallels the river and runs north-south along the river. This would engage with the greenway system that's on the page left here down to the river, and you can see how we've started to envision making those connections through various tiering and systems that we could allow for drainage and resiliency impacts. You can also see the development potential on the right and how that really starts to inform that development pattern on the right and gives a very active space for those users to be. And I'm going to hand it back over to Lucy to talk about the public spaces.
I'm just going to spend just a moment on the public land, the 113 or so acres, but I hope we can talk a little bit about the mobility work in more detail, and I'd invite Steve Bland to give his perspective, because our goal really has been to ensure that the East Bank meets local and regional mobility goals. We think it can perform an important function for our system, so hopefully we can talk about that. But let me just briefly touch on, this is primarily the orange land that is Metro-owned land. These are a lot of the parking lots in and around the stadium. I know there's been a lot in the press about the placement of the stadium and the like, and so one of the first exercises that we conducted was to understand whether the stadium remained in place or was potentially moved. What are the urban design, planning, and mobility impacts of that decision? The conversation about the stadium obviously is much bigger than that. It's operational, it's financial, there's state interests. So for this discussion, we really just focused on the physical or the built environment. And what I would say is you can accomplish many of our objectives under either scenario, but there are downsides and benefits, obviously, as anything in planning around this decision, and certainly there are some mobility impacts that I think would be important for our community to consider as part of this discussion. Here are two illustrative plans that show how the Metro-owned land might develop with different considerations around placement of the stadium, for example, but also you perhaps saw on the mobility discussion that we're proposing a mobility hub on the East Bank. It's where the circle is on the left side of your screen. And this is really to strengthen some of the access and the predictability of ridership in the center part of the city, which Steve can speak to more eloquently than I, but is pretty stopped up during certain points of the day, and getting people to their jobs, getting people to their places where they need to be has become less reliable in certain parts of the city. And so our hope is that this will be beneficial to anyone riding a bus. And so this is a mobility hub. And then obviously moving the stadium increases the type of park space that we have, and it's our ability to respond to flood events. And so we can talk about that a little in more detail. I'll close on this slide. From an urban planning perspective, I think great communities are built around public spaces. And this is a public space concept for how we can think about building in and around the river. It includes greenways that connect existing parks to the East Bank, to downtown. Our hope is that, if you're living on the east side of the city and you want to get on the west side of the city or go points further west, that you can do so in options outside of your car. And so we think we have a great opportunity to accomplish that with this plan. So with that, Michael, should I ask for questions, or how shall I proceed?
I would ask for questions from everyone.
Or Chairman, do you want to lead the okay?
Well, it looks like to me, y'all have already done a lot of work. A lot of people's involved in this. Talking about moving the stadium, you got the Titan fans to think about and everything. Parking and wow. Anybody got any questions? I mean, it's kind of hard to envision this, because you got the river on one side and the interstate. And, what is the time span? Have y'all even thought about that?
Yes. Oh, hello, Mayor.
Yes. Welcome, Mayor. It's good to have you. Your staff's doing a great job.
So starting from the north, the Oracle project has already been approved and is moving forward. And so I would think about it from a north to south perspective. Oracle hasn't released its plans yet, but I would imagine that would be the first of the larger projects to occur. Just to the south of that, near where Jefferson Spring Street is noted there on the illustration, is the truck stop site. I'm sure they would prefer a different brand, but that's where we, have truck, maintenance and things today. And so that's 17 acres. That project has been approved. And so I would sort of imagine that this takes place over years and in many phases.
Any phases? Okay.
Yes, in phases. And some of the, transit-oriented recommendations that we have, I think will happen in phases as well. This is not going to be something, this is a long-term vision to guide this part of our community. But we hope that it positions us well as we have opportunities to improve infrastructure, that we're well positioned to say, we've already studied that and this is what we'd like to see here. So,
as a member of RTA, I'm sure you and Steve done spent many hours. Steve?
He's my new best friend.
Steve, could you tell us how RTA is working toward this and what's going to be down the road for that committee?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's probably the best slide. As we've kind of alluded to in prior RTA meetings, a couple of things. When WeGo Central was originally planned back in the early to mid-2000s, much of the employment in downtown Nashville was on the north end of downtown around the Capitol complex. And in the ensuing period, that employment's really spread out. In the meantime, as we've grown service and ridership, WeGo Central is overloaded. In a typical day, we've got 2,200 bus movements, 17,000 people moving in and out of that building. And it's particularly acute when most of our RTA service takes place during those morning and afternoon peaks. So frankly, the single hub system is really kind of antiquated, and we're really precluded from doing a lot of service growth. So in this scenario where you see kind of a three-legged stool, eventually as the East Bank develops, it gives us the opportunity to be more resilient in our route planning. So for instance, immediately, service coming out of Robertson County, if this facility were in place today, service coming out of Robertson County or Sumner County or Montgomery County could route down through that East Bank Boulevard BRT, kind of bypassing that last section of inner loop coming into downtown, hit an East Bank hub where folks who needed to get out to East Nashville could connect with Gallatin Pike service, continue on into downtown Nashville, whether that be WeGo Central or an envisioned Sobro hub. Similarly, coming up from the southeast part of the county, we're funded on the MTA side to start looking at BRT in the Murfreesboro Pike corridor. So in theory, coming up through there, connections could be made at a southern downtown hub to West End routes to the Vanderbilt area, and then that service could continue up through the downtown core and even ultimately to the East Bank. And one of the questions we got in one of the presentations was, well, my father, who's older, huge Titans fan, I don't necessarily want him driving in that traffic. What could work for him? And you might have noticed in one of the earlier slides, the envisioned East Bank hub is about a block away from where a relocated stadium was envisioned. So in theory, we could be very successful doing something similar on our regional commuter bus side for major events and football games, is what we do with the Star with the Titans Express, especially as we build out those regional park and ride system that we've been talking about at the RTA board. So, much simpler connections to those major events, and that's frankly one of the issues we'll be looking at in the Star Visioning Plan.
Thank you, Stephen. I know there's been a lot of people talking about the new stadium and the chance of us getting a Super Bowl. And as on the tourism side, which I'm big on tourism, I love for people to come into our counties and spend their money and then go back home. I'm big on that. And if that moving the stadium and redoing that can bring in the tourism to our counties around Nashville, it's got to be a plus for everybody. And you getting them in and out of Nashville, it's a big plus. Anybody got any questions? Michael.
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you all for being here today and briefing the mayors on the vision and the illustrative plan that you put together so far. Commend you for the community engagement that's gotten you to this point. Could you talk a little bit about the type of support you'd be looking for from the Transportation Policy Board, particularly around funds that might be prioritized in the upcoming update to the region's multimodal transportation plan, as well as the implementing transportation improvement programs? But also, given that the MPO is part of a broader Regional Council of Governments context now with significant focus on economic development grants, community development grants, also our focus on preparing for an aging population. And just talk broadly, I know we've met staff to staff, but talk a little bit about, what kind of resources or collaboration you'd want out of the organization or the board members.
Thank you for that. Well, as you're aware, we are looking to go after a lot of the federal funding that is available to help us get the East Bank up and going, including starting with the planning grant. That's going to really be the kickoff of moving this forward. All of those federal dollars, if we're successful in getting, because we all have to compete for them, does need to come before this board to be added to the TIP. So that's why we felt it was really important to be having the conversation. But then also, as we start building this out and really get through the planning grant, which is really the first step, and then we come up with what that timeline and what that funding opportunity needs to be, we would be coming back to the board to have that conversation, and then what that regional connection is. As Steve alluded to, there's some great opportunities for that regional connection up to the north part of our, touching into Sumner and all the other counties, as well as out to Murfreesboro and down to Franklin. And we want to make sure that we're building that into the conversation as well. So that's really this is the start of the conversation, but there will be a lot more to come in the future. And of course, to tie in the economic development side, we all know transportation does drive economic development. So that'll be really important. I think, as Lucy said, there's already a lot of entitlements that have been given in this part of the area. We kind of want to shape it in a different conversation than what it is planned for now. So we feel like we're really, you don't have many opportunities in traffic and transportation to get out in front of it. We spend more time retrofitting than we do actually planning and building. So this is a really exciting opportunity because we actually get to build something and get in front of it versus trying to retrofit it. So it's a really great opportunity, and we want to look at how we can have those regional connections. And it will be through this board that we'll be bringing back a lot of those opportunities, getting it in the TIP. We want the federal government to know that there is this need. The growth is actually in Middle Tennessee. It's affecting all of us. So we look at being great partners with all the communities around us as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Mayor Moore.
Well, good morning again, everybody. And I like the idea of decentralizing those stations, Steve. I think that's an important move, and we've talked about that a lot. I think this is a very ambitious plan that's has a lot of significant economic impact long range in the future. Some of my questions I would ask is I need to better understand how this helps the congestion in the inner loop, how it affects us in the South Corridor, which has pretty much been ignored. That's my personal opinion, because it's the only area that has an equal in and out of the city. And I would also express some concern as we're all looking for these federal funds. Is that the most important use for the federal funds that are out there to go to the East Bank for an economic development project? Are there other areas of the city we need to be looking at in the region where those dollars ought to go to relieve some of the congestion and problems that we know we're going to continue to have over the next 25 years? So I think it's a beautiful project. I love the connectivity, the walkability, and all those things that you're showing there.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you get to the heart of our struggle, as a region. And I'm super grateful to the team, and thank you guys for letting me give some of my perspective on this. There is $6.5 billion ready to move in development on the East Bank right now, whether there's a boulevard or not, really. So the ability to engage in smart growth, to get ahead and have development contribution towards a plan that serves way more than the site itself is important. And ultimately, the bridge over the Cumberland and down to Murfreesboro Road, I think, gives a connectivity both to the south and the east that is unrivaled. And giving kind of a additional capacity, local option capacity. I think really the way I think of it is not since Briley Parkway have we had the opportunity to have a material improvement in advance, maybe just in advance of a whole lot of development that does seem inevitable. And by giving local people the option, then they no longer have to use the interstate system for local commutes, the 1 or 2 exit commutes. That if you're north of this site or you live in Donaldson, you can work at Oracle and you don't have to get on the interstate. Now, preliminary traffic seems to indicate 35,000 trips could be moved from the interstate into a hopefully smooth flowing boulevard, which also ends up having large transit benefits. I'm looking over at Steve. I mean, that's the right way to say it. To have the capacity that in time you can flow a lot of stuff. And ultimately getting out to our top 20 airport through Murfreesboro Pike would seem inevitable if you created for all of us living here, there was never that much north-south in Davidson County. There's a lot of east-west, but not that much north-south. So by having a north-south transit spine that lots of stuff can connect to, inevitably you're going to create a network that can offload from the interstate and then serve our people that you're no longer required to get on 24. Now, for a long time we could use it because it wasn't that busy, but not any longer, and not with the size of development that is happening in this area. So the boulevard is, I think, the having an additional facility that will be good for tourism and residents to go to stuff, particularly if it's paid for in a great way that saves everybody money. That's important, but this boulevard is all important for the future of Nashville. I think the ability to have a north-south spine that is connectable to it, but I want to embrace the mayor's concern because I share it. What are we doing on the South Corridor? What are our good ideas there? And I'm excited about getting beyond this into the next chapter of connectivity and service with ideas. A few years ago, this was not an idea on the table. You know, the transit plan of a few years ago didn't even have, I think, much on the East Bank. But as growth has changed in Nashville, and again, I can point to $6.5 billion right now ready to go on this project. It seems important to have the infrastructure in advance, and isn't that what smart growth is? There are other advantages or necessities, advantages too small a role, resilience. This allows the whole East Bank to be planned for resilience and for stormwater. It is impossible to do one parcel at a time. So you'll end up having a much less resilient one parcel at a time project with lots of value put on these sites. But if, with your help, we're able to do this in advance with kind of a comprehensive plan, then there is a lot of community benefit, particularly on this side of Nashville. It's not going to cure everything. It's not the end of our transportation need or story, but it is a transformative capacity increase that I think in the end will help lots and lots of people. So Diana, here, can I, or Lucy?
Well, just one other thing, Mayor Moore, that I would like to add is the opportunity, and as Steve had highlighted, is to actually build out that BRT. The reality is that we have to start thinking about other modes of transportation as our community grows. And so I think the East Bank Boulevard is going to give us an opportunity to really, I want to say, expedite the idea of having a fixed guideway that is going to help us move folks so that we are not all dependent on cars. And that's not an opportunity that was necessarily on the table 2 years ago. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that we are seeing this as an opportunity, and as you'd mentioned, we're kind of spreading out the hubs. It's allowing for better connectivity as well as more reliable service and more convenient service, which is really important when you're talking about building out mass transportation. We're also used to being able to get from point A to point B in a car in a very quick, expedient time. It's studies have shown there's about 11-minute delta, which means if I can get somewhere on a fixed guideline or on a subway system or something, within 11 minutes of what it take me to use a car, I would make the other choice of using the subway or the mass transit. But if it's more than 11 minutes, I'm going to use my car. And that's what the behavior studies are showing. So convenience and reliability is a really important aspect of this. And we have found so many great regional start connections for the East Bank Boulevard that is actually allowing us to expedite. So as Steve talked about Murfreesboro, but we don't want to stop there. And I think the mayor said it very well is, you know, what's the next chapter? We want to get this up and kicking and moving, and then we want to move to the next one, because we do understand that this is going to be a spine that's going to actually allow us to start expediting more of a conversation of regional connection using a different mode than just the automobile. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I want to also respond to Mayor Moore's comments about the South Quarter and just invite Lucy and Diana into some additional conversations about the South Quarter study that just wrapped up. That was $1 million alternatives analysis to look at bus rapid transit, light rail, commuter rail transit between Columbia, Murray County, through Franklin, Brentwood, and on into downtown Nashville. Really good engineering analysis done by WSP and the consulting team through that study. And to revisit some of that analysis with this on the table, I think would be really important. Not just the infrastructure that you're depicting, but the level of land development, the intensity of land development, the jobs and the households that would be in this area that would impact ridership. Also would like to revisit some of the very specific ideas that came out of the Interloop study that the GNRC was working on over the last couple of years that interface with the East Bank. So that's real effort, real planning activity with real federal dollars that have been invested over the last couple of years on two important components of the transportation system for this body that might want to reconnect the more recent efforts on the East Bank.
And Michael, if I could also just, you know, we did have had conversations in prior board meetings about the city's Metro Nashville's request on an overall mobility regional master plan. So taking plans that have already been done, how can we integrate that all in, including the East Bank, and then we're identifying those regional connections, what's the best use, partnering up with TDOT to make sure that we are all having that big conversation about how we move transportation initiatives, not just the car, but all the different modes forward for our region. And understanding that Metro Nashville, Davidson County is in the middle of it all, but we understand that our partners are as everybody in this room. And not everyone lives in Davidson County, though I think everyone should, now that I'm here. But we do understand that, and we want to make sure we have the regional connection. So that is the reason why we put in that request to the board for the mobility master plan from a regional perspective.
And we would just ask that be an integral part of our update to the regional plan that will be adopted by this policy board, which will prioritize the federal funds that you'll be asking for, either through the formula funding or the competitive discretionary money out of DC. So that process will begin later this year, and within 3 years of that start, we'll be bringing that plan back for adoption by this body. So I think we're excited about what you're saying with respect to the multimodal mobility plan and the regional nature of that, but to make that an integral part of our overall plan update, I think will be important.
Well, and I'm kind of simple-minded. Give something great for people to connect to. So step one is to create something to connect to, and then let's get it connected further out, and then that ends up being a pretty good strategy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Has anyone got any more questions? If not, thank you, Mayor Cooper, and thank you, Lucy and Diana. Appreciate y'all being here, and it sounds like we'll be seeing y'all again. Yeah, look forward to keeping us informed, please, and working with you. Thank you. Okay, next I'm going to turn it over to Matt Mercedes with TDOT about some information about everybody's wondering about electric cars and the infrastructure that's going to be used.
All right. Everybody can hear me all right? Sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, but we will get through this. Again, my name is Matt Meservy. I'm the Director of Long-Range Planning with TDOT. Thank you again for having me here to discuss, I guess, where we've come from, where we're at, and where we're going with respect to electric vehicles. So a little bit of the history. Back in 2018, Drive Electric Tennessee became a more prominent membership, part of Clean Fuels coalitions in Tennessee. This is a membership that consists of a number of different varieties of groups, state agencies, electric utilities, cities, universities, a bunch of people that got together. One of the first things that they did was to kind of establish a goal that by 2028 they would like to have EV adoption reach around 200,000. Currently, we're at somewhere around June of 2022. We were at 20,000. So this is a pretty lofty goal that they have. But the trend is moving upward pretty quick. I think you've all have probably seen that when you look around, there are a lot more electric vehicles in the fleet next to you. And they're not just Teslas anymore. So the fleet is growing. The styles are changing. They're becoming a lot more prominent in the grand scheme of things. Back in 2019, understanding this, they put together a needs assessment. And, this needs assessment really looked at the condition of EVs and where they're at. And it came to a conclusion that, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but, Tennessee's electric vehicle infrastructure is lacking. There are a lot of gaps across the state. That also brings in what is referred to as range anxiety, which is essentially the concern that if you're in a pure electric vehicle, you're driving along these corridors, you worry that you may not reach your destination and be able to charge. So you're essentially running out of gas or charge through that. So hearing that, and with TVA being part of this membership, TVA started to invest a little bit in what's referred to now as the Fast Charge TN network in Tennessee. As you know, TVA is a 7-state utility provider. They do this in a number of their own states that they provide service to, but in Tennessee, this established a large network. They invested a lot of money in establishing this network, and you can see from the top graphic that a lot of this network does fall in with the distress and at-risk counties. The bottom graphic is a little bit of a cleaner representation of what's been identified as a Fast Charge TN network. Somewhere along the line, TDEC stepped in and started to provide some funding from the Volkswagen settlement, and they put together a competitive grant that was directed to the local power companies to help develop sites along this network to start to close those gaps along that. And this is all before the national infrastructure came into play, but TDEC and TVA had started this. TDOT actually did contribute about $7 million of HIP funding to this cause, but unfortunately we got kind of stuck in the Buy America red tape, so we had to pull out. We were hitting too many restrictions, and the certification process had not been really established, so we had to back out and just kind of watch from the sidelines at that point. One of the first accomplishments of this was the first charging station that was part of this competitive grant was opened in Martin, Tennessee, in the west part of the state. I was actually attending this ribbon cutting back in August, and the excitement was there. It was just a great time. People were really excited about how this was starting to create a little bit of a buzz, so to speak, between the charging station and moving forward. So that competitive grant awarded 40 different sites across the state, and again, Martin was the first one. So there'll be more success stories as time goes on, but again, this was the first accomplishment. Another thing that we wanted to talk about too, as far as the revolution of EVs and how people are trying to help contribute, is the partnership between Rivian, the automaker that I'm sure you've seen that type of vehicle, the truck that's out there with the unique headlight orientation, and the agreement with the Tennessee State Parks. So Rivian has offered to install and maintain level 2 charging stations at all 56 state parks in Tennessee. There's currently 3 that are up and operational. One's at Radnor Lake, where this picture was taken for the ribbon cutting. There's also Montgomery Bell and Pickwick Landing that are up and operational. These are free for anybody that wants to do that at the state parks. And I've heard that by the end of this fall, there will be about 26 more parks up and running. So if you get a chance to, does anybody have an electric vehicle? Great. I don't feel we talked about this last time. I feel like, but I mean that's I think 3 times as many it was at the TCC. So I think more is coming, but the revolution is here. I think everybody, if you did watch the Super Bowl back in January, you probably noticed during the commercials that every automaker commercial touted their electric vehicle model. So if you're going to spend that kind of money on a Super Bowl commercial, you're probably pretty serious in what the future looks like for that. So let's go into TEVI. TEVI is our term for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. This is the program that was introduced from the new Infrastructure Act. It came out in February. It gave us about 6 months to put a plan together that would help us unlock the funds for the next 5 years. Some of the plan goals, they are similar to what was used for the Fast Charge TN network. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll give you a little chance to kind of flip through them, but they're fairly consistent with most of the goals of trying to put together a plan like this. But the concerns of cybersecurity and how we decide the types of locations where these stations go in and what kind of standards are put in place, with a lot of things that we still have to put forward. Funding for this nationwide was about $4.2 billion for the next 5 years. Tennessee's receiving roughly $88 million of that. The first allocation year, 2022, we received about $13.7 million. I don't think we've heard yet. Where's Sean? We haven't heard anything about the 23 fiscal allocation yet. But if anybody's quick at math, 13.7 times 5 is not $88 million. So there will be some larger portions of allocation coming our way at some point. But right now we know we have $13.7 million to play with. For this initial round, we have to provide these charging stations, this infrastructure, to the eligible alternative fuel corridors. And as you can see here, these are basically the double-digit interstates, except for I-55 in Memphis, and then US 64 that runs between Memphis and Chattanooga along the southern border, roughly 1,500 miles. Again, this is what's eligible right now with the NEVI funding. And until we get the build out of this, we cannot use it towards anything else. Some of the requirements that go into the TEVI plan is that the stations have to be DC fast chargers using this combined charging system CCS Type 1 port. This is the port that allows for the fastest charge rate. Spacing requirements, these stations have to be no more than 50 miles between each other, and they cannot exist more than 1 travel mile beyond that corridor. The power requirements are also fairly standardized. Minimum of 4 charging stations at each location, and those have to simultaneously charge at 150 kilowatts. So again, if 4 vehicles were charging at the same time, they cannot pull any less than 150. So a minimum of 600 kilowatts. Stations are allowed, or locations are allowed to have more than 4, and we don't know exactly. We need to check with our joint office to find out if each of those charging stations have to have the minimum of 150, or if it's just the 4 at the minimum. So we still need to look into that as we move forward. Most of the month of May was spent doing public engagement on this. Again, a six month study doesn't really give us a lot of time to go through multiple rounds of public hearings. So we decided as a group, us and the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, we were kind of the joint authors of this plan, decided that we want to make this the plan of the people. So we, as opposed to other DOTs who actually developed the plan and then released it for public comment, we decided to get the input first before we put the plan together. So we spent a lot of time through social media. We did 9 in-person engagements, as you can see there. We had a fairly comprehensive website, which is still active if you still have any desire to go look at that. And produced a MetroQuest style survey that, upon the evaluation, hit about 88 counties out of the 95, 274 zip codes, over 1,000 respondents. And you could see here from the top concerns that we received is that these location criteria in the eyes of the user need to be in highly traveled volume areas. They need to connect some points of interest or destinations, and they need to provide some amenities because these fast charging stations are providing somewhat of a pit stop style refueling opportunity, similar to what you would do if you went to a convenience store and filled up, went to the bathroom, bought some snacks, and moved out. It's about 20 minutes to get to a pretty substantial charge. Some of the ideas, we still also want to make sure that we are looking into future-proofing these locations, so coordinating with the local power companies and making sure that we're accommodating for all these different types of vehicles that are coming in, the medium-duty and heavy-duty trucks, and also making sure that these charging stations, as technology improves and these stations become more available to charge more than 150 kilowatts, that we provide some of those things that will help us swap out some of these stations to keep up with the technology. This is mostly going to be, I think, as we move on, more of a private venture than anything else. TDOT was given this opportunity to provide it through the federal funds, but I think as we move on, the ability to keep up with the times is going to be more of a private or maybe a public-private type of relationship than just the state providing funds and moving forward. Because this is a unique program for us. This is the only program that we manage where we don't own any of the assets. We don't own the power. We're probably not going to own the locations. And the equipment, I think we've decided that we don't want to be part of that because we don't want to maintain equipment that's roughly obsolete. So we're just here to help jumpstart that. So timeline, it was due August 1st. We were lucky enough to put it in a couple days early. Federal Highway, thank you, has given us the approval already, so they were ahead of time for our approval. So the next steps are actually the big steps, and that's towards implementation. We have to start, as we're doing right now, we're working on how we're going to procure this. I'll talk a little bit on the next slide about what we're thinking as far as procurement ideas. We also need to start putting our standards together, and hopefully by the end of the second quarter of 23, we are awarding these contracts to people that can actually start putting these things in the ground, locating the sites and putting them into the ground. So here are some of the things that we really have to concentrate on. As you can see on the left, we have a lot of issues that we want to make sure we're taking care of before we just start to go out and start putting chargers in the ground. Operations and maintenance, we have to make sure that who we contract with has the ability to keep these things up and running. We don't want them to fall into disrepair. We also need to find out where these will be located, what kind of equipment will be used, the software, the communications part of that, and as you can see here, supply chain, Buy America, and potential labor shortages or even equipment shortages on that. This middle column here talks about some of the things that we're looking into as criteria when looking for a site. This is still being vetted right now. We're working with some of the East Tennessee Coalition right now to come up with what I think will be more of a tiered approach to how these sites get evaluated, whether we start with minimum requirements that are going to be standard and then talk about amenities that would be great, and then also talk about some of the fluff amenities that would be great but are not really required. Contracting is one of the big things that we still need to work on. I think what we're trying to do is to break these contracts into larger areas across the state. So more than likely, these are going to become either regional-based or maybe separated by the grand divisional designations or demarcations, and then talk about how or who we're going to contract with, whether it's the local vendor, whether it's a team that can produce the services from cradle to grave. Still don't know that yet. That's what we're working on, and as you saw from the timeline, we still have a little bit of time work on that. But I guess we would love to hear your comments on that. Getting close to the end of the presentation here, as I mentioned before, the thing that we have to do first and foremost is to hit build out. That is what NEVI required us to do. So we have to make sure that the spacing requirements, all the gaps have been filled, and we have hit the 50-mile spacing in all areas before we can actually go out to post build out, which we think would be phase 2. From what we've heard, the restrictions won't be as hard on us. For example, we may not need to do DC fast chargers everywhere. We could probably go into some level 2 chargers, but all of this will still have to be from federal funds, so they have to be publicly accessible 24/7. They don't have to be located on the corridors, but what I think would be the best is if they did fall within the fast charge TN network, we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but we still have a little bit of work to do. And I think when we hit that, phase 1 is going to take a couple years. So I think when we get into the phase 2 section, we can come back and we can have more of a discussion about how cities and some other areas could benefit from potential federal funding for charging stations. Justice 40. Has anybody heard about Justice 40 up to this point? This is an initiative by the Biden-Harris administration for providing a little bit of equity when it comes to the federal funding. Justice 40, the goal of Justice 40 is to have 40% of the federal benefits flow to disadvantaged communities. And this graphic here shows the shaded areas are where they've been identified as part of this NEVI plan. It goes through a lot of different, see if I can, some of the things that go into the disadvantaged communities are low income, high employment, high unemployment, racial and ethnic segregation, linguistic isolation, high housing costs, distressed neighborhoods, high transportation cost burden, and a couple others. What this doesn't necessarily mean is that the benefit or the money does not have to be spent in those shaded areas. It just means that it has to benefit those shaded areas. So, for example, if there's a DBE firm that could help put these stations in the ground that come from some of these shaded areas, that would help benefit or help us achieve the Justice 40 goal. I'm sure more people will hear about this because this Justice 40 initiative is really meant when investment is centered around climate change, clean energy, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, pollution. So any of the things that are related to environmental will have to be we'll have to adhere to the Justice 40 initiative that they're doing. I'm almost done. So yeah, this is my last slide. Actually, this is just showing that we're not alone. Tennessee is not doing this in a vacuum. We are part of the Southeast a collaboration that is looking at coordinating everybody's NEVI plan. We want to make sure that, for example, when we get close to our state borders, that we're not putting a station on our side and the other state's putting one on the other side, and they're 10 miles apart. We want to be able to make sure that we coordinate with them. So we have bi-weekly calls with this group to make sure that none of that is happening. So that is the last thing I wanted to say. Again, if you want to learn more and see where we're at, the draft plan or the approved plan is now on the TDOT EV plan site. My partner over at TDEC, Alexa Boytek, we usually tag team this presentation, but she couldn't make it today, so I did my best at taking over her slides as best I could. But if you do have any other questions, you can reach out to me or Alexa at any point. So now I will be happy to take questions.
Everyone is very for this kind of network. A lot of our communities aren't going to be Justice 40 communities. A lot of our communities aren't going to be right along the corridor. So sort of 2 questions here. How far off those corridors are you going to go from those interstates and Highway 64? Do you know the answer to that yet?
Well, again, the NEVI program. Oh, there you are, Sean. You just popped out of my side. The NEVI program requires us to make sure that we are within the 50-mile spacing of the corridors and no more than a mile from those designated corridors for the build out. Okay. To achieve build out. If we have money remaining then we can pursue opportunities to go beyond the corridors and decide where the money would be best utilized in any part of the state. Does that?
Yeah, I'll get to the other question, but go ahead if you've got more to it.
Well, I was also going to add, so everything that Matt's talking about here is the formula funding that's provided to TDOT for their implementation of this program, but we'll also have, from the federal perspective, 2 additional discretionary programs for local governments to compete directly to USDOT for funding for charging infrastructure and other alternative fuels infrastructure. So there will be opportunities to go outside of these corridors, or to go toward major employment sites, major attractors, things like that, where the charging infrastructure might be beneficial but not necessarily fit into the requirements of this program.
Yeah, one of those is a community-based discretionary grant. I forget what the other one's called, but I think it's more for the fueling stations and things like that. But
I think that's helpful because a lot of our communities that don't sit close enough to those corridors are communities with people that are going to be buying those vehicles. At the same time, I think it's important to look at is there a hub, or their need for a hub based on an employer or based on a event venue that might be worthwhile. We've started to look at what we need to change in our zoning code, and so this is helpful to know that we need to move forward with that.
Right. Again, with the phase 1 of NEVI, this is all DC fast chargers. When we get beyond the corridors, where movement and mobility is not necessarily the core reason why people are traveling, we have the ability to reduce the cost by going to level 2 chargers, which take a little bit longer, but you're not you're not trying to move as fast as you can from one place to the next. It allows you to dwell. That's why the state parks have level 2 chargers, because they're not intended to be in and out type of locations.
There was y'all were the waiver.
Oh yes sir. Yep. Yeah, we're actually looking to provide some comments to that. The Buy America waivers are helping with some of these charging station vendors to bypass the Buy America provisions at this point, but they phase out, I think, within 18 months or something like that. It's a pretty quick phase out period, but we are aware of that, and I think we've heard some of those vendors will probably respond to that more than we could, but our focus is on the implementation side of things, like how are these certified? What are ways that pre-assembled products that have steel and iron in them, how do they get certified without tearing it apart and making sure that all of that is in compliance?
Mayor Rogers Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Matt. Good information. Just a question. If you're going to put 200,000, your first slide, 200,000 more cars in electric, and you assume each car is $500 in gas taxes, how the heck are you all planning on paying for all this?
Okay, well, so first let me say that this is not 200,000 additional cars. This would be replacing current vehicles.
That's even worse. So you're
no, I mean, I'm just saying that, well, yes. I'm just trying to make sure that this doesn't make it seem like we're overloading the system any more than we are. But yes, there is a discussion on how electric vehicles do pay for their wear and tear on these. We're working with, there are some federal pilot programs that come out that look at ways that we can use user-based fees to help fund that. Currently, the state charges pure electric vehicles $100 above and beyond their registration. So back at the napkin calculation, that's roughly equivalent to about 12, maybe 10 to 12,000 gas miles of, equivalent to gas tax when you drive 10 to 12,000 miles. You probably spend about $4 per fill-up on tax, and if you travel somewhere around 300 to 400 miles in one tank, again, that's the equivalent. But our financial group is looking at ways to find out whether or not that's a sustainable revenue stream and how that's going to affect the wear and tear. Currently, I mean, right now, electric vehicles are a little bit heavier than standard gas vehicles, so they're theoretically putting more wear and tear on the highway. But as battery technology changes and the miles, the capacity of those batteries get better, and they're actually getting lighter. So that might not always be the case.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up.
Yes, sir, I knew you was gonna ask that question.
What, the dollar amount?
Yes, I did.
Well,
I was thinking it too, Mayor.
Matt's not in position to answer it. I just want to be sure that it was on his radar.
Oh, yes, sir.
That
Yeah.
somebody has to pay for
We
that.
had, during that March tour of the state, we had a lot of that conversation happen. So.
A bigger issue, I think, is not shift all the attention away from Matt, is Matt's mentioned it. I've heard Mayor Cooper mention it. All of us are facing with it. It's probably in the best interest of GNRC to begin to look at helping all of the counties, maybe the bigger cities and some of the more solid counties that got a little deeper pockets, but more and more emphasis has been placed on grant writing. And Michael, it's if you just follow the guidelines that he outlined, federal, state, you're almost going to need a grant writer in-house to be able to track all this. And then that's not counting your local, your emergency management grants, all of those things. Those are becoming the real cost in our schools, which all counties have to pay for, and in our operational programs that we're having with all these federal dollars. There's going to be a market for grant writers. I just don't know how that's going to shape out. Is it going to be on a percentage base? Is it going to bring someone in house? You're going to train them. They're going to get good, and then they're going to go to work for the private sector. I don't know all that, but in the meantime, GNRC should be looking at some of these ways to help all of us in grant writing, because that's going to be a huge cost. We've done several programs with Federal Highway. One of them Eddie worked with several years ago, and just to hire the person to track the rules and regulations was a full-time person sat in a pickup truck and check off boxes.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody else got a question for Matt?
I do have a couple of probably easy questions that may already be answered by the document. But to respond to that, I'm with you. We do have in-house grant writers. Michael Mills is our director of ECD, but I think there's also a shift in our focus with respect to the grant writing to be much more infrastructural in nature versus, job creation and retention through the economic development grants that they do. But I'll task Michael Mills with coming with a plan to address that question for you. For Matt, again, apologies if these are answered by the document. Sure. Did you say out loud these publicly accessible stations, which is the requirement? Is there a fee are you paying for the electricity that you're
So these will
accessing?
These will be operated similar to what a gas convenience, the gas stations will be. They're the entity that will be operating these will be able to set the price, the market price, and that could be different in a rural and an urban area. But they are capped. I mean, they can't gouge them through the federal requirements to just come up with any number necessarily.
So there are parameters for how that should be set. And then the other is, have y'all started mapping out suitability? You had a slide of all the factors that you're looking at. You started mapping that out.
I did mention that we're working with the East Tennessee Clean Fuels Coalition and Drive Electric Tennessee to come up with the criteria. They received a second half of our I-40 deployment plan grant, and we're working on that when NEVI came out. So we've shifted our focus a little bit on providing more of the criteria to determine what we want to make standard at all sites, making sure that we've got safety and security and some of the real core items that need to be part of the user experience, and then break it down into other things that are optional amenities that could enhance the user experience but are not necessarily required. So we haven't come up with that yet. It's not finalized.
Okay. As that unfolds, we'd love to be part of that process. As you know, I think you were on staff when we mapped out the suitability of locations for the American Recovery Reinvestment Act funding for chargers some time ago now. I don't remember the brand name of that. But
right.
And then we also are interested in looking beyond the criteria that you're using for phase 1 or phase 2, just the broader suitability for siting level 2 chargers or the DC fast chargers. And so I think we'd like to expand on whatever methodologies that you have to satisfy the NEVI requirements to help our local governments. To Mayor Clary's point about land use planning, I think we'd like to build that into the work that we're already doing.
You bet.
Anyone else? You know,
Mr. Chair, if I could just briefly chime in to Mayor Anderson. I mean, at DOT, we recognize that this bipartisan infrastructure law provides it's a huge influx of discretionary grant opportunities, and we're trying to manage that also. It presents a significant burden to the locals. We're trying to do things. We've established a Thriving Communities initiative that's going to set up templates and try to streamline the grant application process, and not just the application process, but actually that delivery, understanding all those rules and regulations that are involved in delivery of a federal grant award. I wouldn't say we're quite there yet. It's probably the biggest priority in our office is how we can support you guys in effectively understanding all these opportunities and delivering these projects. It's on our radar also. Just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you. You know, as a mayor of a county, you know, I see where this is going, but I probably won't be in office when it really happens. But you know, but one day you're going to have to put one in your bus garages, one of these stations where they can charge up. Don't you think, Mayor? What does it cost to put one of those stations up? Have you got any idea?
You mean like a personal one?
Yeah, like that lady over there's got one. I guess you charge up at your house, right? But one day, if we don't know how to write grants, there may be some mandates that cities and counties have to have these things at certain spots, and if they just go with school buses or sheriff department went electric or whatever.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact stat, but most of the electric vehicle charging occurs at the owner's household, whether it's through the level 2, you know, the customized chargers that they have, or just a trickle charge that you plug into any outlet. But you know, the cost savings just alone on fuel is pretty substantial. Your electric bill gets a little bit higher, but they have different rates for these types too. They're usually on a different circuit.
Okay. Anybody else got a question from that? Mayor?
The company that just came to Wilson County, Caltranium.
Tritium, yes.
Caltranium. Their goal, I guess, to start out with is 10,000 chargers for the first year and going to 30,000 a year. So they will make a significant difference, I think,
yes,
for this.
And they have claimed that all of their chargers will be Buy America compliant.
Yeah.
So that's going to be huge for them. And I was at that grand opening as well. That was great.
That's right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Stick around. I think you're going to have to do another one here in a minute.
Yeah, I keep standing there.
Okay. We'll go to our regular reports now, and we'll go start with our federal report from Sean Santalia.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Vogel. So I'm Sean Santaya. I'm a planner with our Federal Highway Administration. You all are familiar with Pam Cordenbrock, our division administrator. I did want to introduce a new member of our team today. I've got with me Gilberto De Leon. He is our new deputy division administrator. So those of you that recall Sabrina David, she's since taken a promotion to the Georgia division, moved to Atlanta, and so Gilberto will be stepping in that role.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, board. I appreciate you letting me hang out with you today and listening to the good presentations. I'm coming out of Virginia, so I'm unfamiliar with Nashville and Tennessee's challenges, but I appreciate that. And I have some business cards for anybody that's interested.
And then just a few updates from our team. Everyone's kind of alluded to all the funding opportunities through the federal government, so I'm going to put in a plug for 3 more. Reconnecting Communities pilot program is a discretionary grant program that we have open right now for projects that address areas where transportation infrastructure has cut off our communities or disconnected communities, presents a barrier or a burden between where people live, work, and play, presents a burden to economic development, that sort of thing. So this is a pilot program, approximately $195 million available, open to states, MPOs, and local governments, and that will close on October 13th. So any good ideas of projects that address that sort of need, we encourage applications there. And then we've got 2 technology and innovation focused grant programs that just opened up a couple of days ago. So the SMART program, Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, is funded at approximately $100 million, and this is for demonstration projects that that focus on advanced smart community technologies and systems that address transportation efficiency and safety. So sort of more of our pilot, innovative demonstration types of projects when it comes to transportation technology. And that will close on November 18th. And then our ATTAIN program is a new name for our previous ATC MTD program, if anyone has heard of that one. Metro Nashville is actually a previous awardee of our ATC MTD program for their Charlotte Ave Transit Headways project. So this is for more sort of established transportation technologies where we have proven technologies that improve safety, mobility, efficiency, and that sort of thing. And this is approximately $60 million available that we're taking applications for, and this will close on November 18th as well. So just wanted to put in a plug for those, and then also mention, Matt, I don't know if you have it in your update, but we did just recently announce our awardees for our infra program, and TDOT was awarded for the Smith County I-40 bridge replacement and truck parking project just east of us here. So wanted to recognize TDOT for that. Those of you that would have applied for infra, it was a joint application with our mega and rural project program, and we're still reviewing and scoring mega and rural applications. So that's all we've got.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody got any questions for Sean? Okay, thank you for that report, Sean. We'll move to our TDOT report. Matt?
Sure. Other than the infra grant award, I guess I can talk about that we are about ready to embark on our carbon reduction strategy. We are working with a consultant, negotiating the final price with the consultant, and we'll be developing this carbon reduction strategy. The carbon reduction program was another program that was introduced in the Infrastructure Act. It's essentially CMAQ for the entire state. Similar eligibilities for those types of projects. They're looking at keeping the carbon footprint as low as possible, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We'll be working with all the MPOs across the state. I know we brought this up at our MPO meeting a couple Fridays ago to try to get some people that are interested in joining our stakeholder committee group to get started on that. So that's really all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to comment on that, please? Seeing none, it goes to my report, and all I've got is to look forward to, if you haven't, go ahead and register next week to attend our annual meeting and luncheon at the youth soccer park. You want to add something, Michael?
Just wanted to make sure that was on the screen.
Okay. Yeah, be a part of this. You get to see spend some time and break bread together, if nothing else. But I enjoy going because I know you've always got some awards and stuff, don't you? Yeah. Sean, you've been pretty quiet. You got something you want to add? Your report?
I know it's been a quiet meeting for staff. Just under the staff report, I wanted to make sure that give everyone an update on the Project Delivery Task Force. I know that some of you that participate as members of that have been wondering when our next meeting is. We have been working to make sure that next meeting is productive and a good use of your time. Through a lot of the work, we identified a number of potential actions that we could pursue across a number of those areas of opportunity that we have covered, from data to communication to programming and process improvements. And TDOT is actively reviewing that or going to get us some comments with their input. And kind of going through that exercise with TDOT, I think, is so that we have feasible actions that we can pursue that TDOT is on board with. And so look forward to getting that feedback and that relay it to the task force. We're also looking to schedule a TDOT presentation for the next meeting, if you haven't already heard about it, the Project Delivery Network as part of TDOT's in an integrated project delivery process, particularly focused on state-led projects for now, but I think it really ties in well to a lot of the things that we've discussed through the Project Delivery Task Force and accelerating timeframes of project delivery. And so hopefully that we can secure that date, and then we'll circulate to you all some potential dates that work and get that next meeting scheduled. Also wanted to let you know that we do have the draft TIP, Federal Fiscal Year 2023 to 2026 TIP, both the document and the application available for your review. You can access them at the links that we'll share again in the follow-up email, but feel free to explore the document as well as the new application. Search, your projects, your organization's projects within your county, and let us know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns on that, as the document's currently under state review, and we'll be looking to release for public review and comment, and then at our next meeting to try and get that adopted. So just a preview of our November Transportation Policy Board meeting. In addition to looking to adopt the 2023-2026 TIP, we'll also have another cycle of amendments. We'll also be trying to bring to you the annual safety performance measure targets that we ask you to adopt. And also we are going to get TDOT, Lisa Dunn from TDOT's local programs office, to present on bridge funding opportunities. And so let us know if you have any other questions or comments, things that you'd like us to bring forward, but that's just a preview of what we have in store for our next meeting. That's all I have.
That's all you got? Michael, you got anything else?
Yes, sir.
Does anybody got anything they'd like to bring up from the board? Okay, looks like, if not, our next meeting is 11/16/22. I'm going to ask all of you to please leave your little cards in front of you, right? She keeps me straight. And then I'm looking for one more motion. Move to adjourn. So moved.
All right. Informative meeting.
Yeah, that was.